Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring with the harmony of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the glistening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing a rising sun of a new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won. Let us march on till victory is won. Let us march on to victory.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome. If you don't know anything about the song that we're starting off with, it became known as the Black National Anthem. The words were written by James Weldon Johnson. We are here tonight to acknowledge Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And we would be remiss by not acknowledging the land that Keene State College in New Hampshire is located. It's very important to acknowledge the people who steward this land long before any of us came to this land, either by force or by choice. We have to acknowledge the presence of those individuals, those indigenous people who continue to walk the land and be affected by the trails that we are leaving currently. So tonight we will bring the past and the present together so we could learn and launch a better future for our children and our children's children. Welcome. Dr. King talked a lot about creating this thing called a beloved community, where it would be free from poverty, oppression, and most of all, violence. As you could tell from the announcement, he talked about of all of the inequalities, and I'm gonna say it again, of all of the inequalities. Injustice in healthcare is the most shocking and inhumane, and I would say one of the most violent ones. So welcome tonight for us to learn together, for us to venture together, for us to think together about how we can create a different reality for our children and for generations to come. So in order to do that, we're here with some amazing people who work very hard in New Hampshire to do that for us all and with us all. I feel so honored to be among them today and to be able to work with them and be able to struggle and laugh and cry and do all of the wonderful things that it takes to be a part of the human experience together. So without further ado, you don't need to hear any more from me. I'm gonna turn it over to my colleague, friend, and I will definitely say my dear sister, Dr. Karen Jennings. Dr. Karen Jennings is a professor in the psychology department at Keene State College. So I'll turn it over to Karen, and Karen will introduce the rest of the panel.
Thank you so much, Dr. Morris. It's such really an honor, pleasure, and privilege to be here in the presence of these really amazing, talented, dedicated clinicians, scientists, activists, really, truly incredible people whose professional work and personal lives focus on justice and equity and health, truly embodiments of Dr. King's words. And so folks, be prepared to learn a great deal and to be inspired. Just as an aside, you should have received an email that has a copy of the governor's COVID-19 equity response team initial report and recommendations. And our panelists, many of the comments will be drawn from this really incredible report. So make sure you check this report out and read it after our panel tonight. There is so much to learn in that report. So it is my great honor to introduce our panelists. We'll start with Bobbie D. Bagley, the Director of the Division of Public Health and Community Services for the City of Nashua. We have Kirsten Durzy, who will be here at 7. She is the COVID Equity and Public Health Expert, Health Equity Program Director, CDC Foundation. We have Dr. Marie Ramas, Medical Director, Gatehouse Treatment Center, and President-elect of the New Hampshire Academy of Family Physicians. And we have Dr. Trinidad Tellez, Principal Health Equity Strategies and former Director of the New Hampshire Office of Health Equity. What will happen is we have 3 rounds of conversation, and we will pause in between the 3 rounds to respond to questions. And please feel free, folks, at any point to chime in on the chat with questions. And so the 3 rounds will happen. We'll have questions, and then we'll end up really with a conversation among panelists as well. Let's start with our first round. I've asked the panelists to respond to this prompt. Please describe what called you to your work, and describe for the audience the nature, challenges, and joys associated with your work. I thought if Bobbie D wouldn't mind if we start with Bobbie D and then go through. So Bobbie, please take it away. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Jennings. And thank you, Dr. Morris, for inviting me to be a participant on this panel to share. It is a privilege and an honor to be here with you all this evening with my esteemed colleagues, and I would say with my friends. So in response to this question, when I reflected on what called me to my work and described the nature and the challenges and even the joys associated with it, I realized how much my work in public health is connected to the work that I do as a minister of faith and my role as a servant leader. I was a minister of the gospel before finishing college. I was a minister before I became a nurse, and I was a minister before I became a public health worker and leader in this community and in this state. From this foundation, which is grounded in the spirit of love and compassion and in faith, I was drawn to this field of practice and this field of work that really focuses on providing services for all populations and looking how I could improve life for all people and their well-being. I work in the field, and in my work, my aim is to provide education, is to provide awareness, and to promote the health and well-being and prevention to preserve the health of the public. And that includes all of us. In my training as a nurse and in my role as the director for the City of Nashua's Division of Public Health and Community Services, I lead a team of individuals that are dedicated and make sacrifices to promote the health of the public through environmental health services, through community services, and through community health services and welfare. we're boots on the ground. Every day we see both the benefits of the programs and the lack of services that are in the community. And because our function in public health not only includes assuring services, but also that we're providing equitable services in the communities that we work in by checking out or assessing what the problems are, as well as what the resources are. And so there are challenges that come with this, and it's really rooted in the lack of sufficient resources and funding and even staffing capacity in order for us to respond as effectively and efficiently as we can to provide services in the community. We work with nonprofit organizations, and we also see their struggles as well with lack of funding and support. We look to address affordable housing needs, jobs, substance use disorder, mental health support, and also social and health services. And so some of that can be challenging. The joys that I experience, and I experience this as a part of the team of folks that I work here in the division and city workers as well, is the fact that all of us come together to work collectively and collaboratively in the community. It takes us all caring in that mindset for the community, which makes up our entire public health system. And so it's not just our local health department or our state health department, or even at the federal level, but it takes us locally as community, the village, to actually get this work done. And so the joy comes in knowing that the impact that we make on the community and providing and preserving the health of the public is because we do this collectively. And so that beautiful community that we're talking about, we build this, and we look forward to doing this work together. It comes through leadership, and it comes from all of us realizing that the power lies within us all to do this together to sustain the health and well-being of not just ourselves individually, but in our communities collectively.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you so much, Bobbie. Absolutely fabulous. It really seems that you're very much committed to, enabling people to live their best lives, and that this can be accomplished really through collaboration, coming together, and it's all of our responsibilities, isn't it? And I think, folks, tonight, you'll hear that as a theme that all of our panelists are weaving. It's our collective responsibility to work together to give rise, right, to justice and health and equity and health. Let's pause just for a few minutes, and I'll peek and see if anyone's chiming in on the chat, and then I'll just query our panelists. Were there things that you wanted to elaborate on or respond to in terms of what Bobbie said? No, we're good. Okay, thank you so much. And Marie, would you mind going next? Thank you.
Sure. Thank you so much for the invitation. My name is Marie Ramas. I am a firstborn American, Haitian American, born here as a first generation. Grew up in New Hampshire, and really have enjoyed growing up here, leaving to pursue my career, and more recently returning back home to New Hampshire to complete my service here. And so much like Bobbie, what has motivated me to pursue this path? And from a young age, particularly given my background as a Caribbean American, understanding the interconnectedness of community and understanding our role and how we can impact other people has been an integral part of how I perceive the world around me. And, it's interesting being a first generation American, because in the home, we spoke different languages, we ate different foods, we had different ways of communication and even sometimes priorities. And then outside of the home, it was a different milieu for me. And so there was a juxtaposition of, I think, understanding how I saw myself and how I identified as a Caribbean American versus the inequities and the the challenges that we faced when the world around us would see us and interpret us, my family. And so one thing that is key to how I perceive the world was really understanding what is the functional unit, what is the functional unit of my community and of our society. And for me, it was family, however we defined it, but understanding that because I wanted to impact a community, to me, the most logical option was to touch the family unit. And because the two most impactful people in my life, besides my family members, were my physician and my teachers, it was a slam dunk, you know, it's one or the other for me. And, you know, I really enjoy teaching people. I enjoy inspiring people. And most importantly, I enjoy understanding people's story within the context that they come. So I said, you know, maybe I'll be a teacher. And I remember coming into my my high school years and recognizing that not everyone wants to learn. Not everyone is eager to learn like I was. And I said, you know what? I don't want to deal with that. I'm going to be a doctor instead, right? So that's what brought my journey as a family physician. And really, I wanted to, I was glad when I got into medical school because being the first physician in the family, I didn't know there was a specialty called family medicine. And I naively felt, I'm like, well, I've gotten this far. I guess I can create a whole different specialty that fits the needs that I'm looking for. But what's unique about family medicine is that it really requires us as specialists to see patients within their context. There is no separation within my my pedagogy coming through as a physician leader that removes a patient outside of the context in which they live. And to me, that is the foundation of what Dr. King spoke about. He spoke often about who's our neighbor. And so often my patients would come to me and just question, why can't I just be seen for the valued human being that I am? But the other aspect as well is taking the responsibility to speak the truth of those who are not listened to. And throughout my my growth and development in my career, that has been a consistent undertone, is making sure that the stories and the perceptions, the perspectives, of the communities that I serve that are least heard have the opportunity to be, if not present at the table, if not making the decisions at the table, at least being represented at the table. And so I recognize that not everyone has that privilege. But really at the foundation of it all, I recognize that over the last couple of years, you know, words like diversity and equity and equality, they've become very sexy and very polarizing. But at the foundation of what everyone wants, which is to have the most opportunity to be the best forms of themselves, you can't separate that from equity, because really equity is meeting each person within their context again, and speaking in a way that empowers and activates their agency. And so that is really the foundation of my journey. And through COVID particularly, I felt that it was vital to be a representation and hopefully a bridge, not only for the communities that I serve, but also for my fellow colleagues across the state and across the nation. We have been pushed in ways that we have not been pushed before. We've had to come to reckoning on so many different issues, and it has worn the hearts of many of my colleagues. And so how can we be activists to sustain and maintain and dare I say, empower our communities and the people that we serve and those who we serve alongside of to continue a long-lasting legacy.
Thank you so much. So beautiful. You know, it strikes me, Bobbie, Marie, that the whole person perspective, you know, you both talked about, you know, equity being opportunity for people to become the best form of themselves, live their best lives. And what strikes me so much, Marie, is that you talked about seeing each other as a neighbor. Imagine if we lived in a world where we saw each other as neighbors. That seems very clearly a place where we can all live our best lives. And that seeing people as neighbors enables truth telling, people telling their stories and our honoring the truths. So I really see so much unity in terms of Bobbie and Marie, in terms of your ideas as well. So let's just pause again and let's see about the chat chiming in. Did anyone want to respond to each other at this point? Or Trini, would you mind taking us away? Thank you.
Sure, thank you. And I also want to extend my appreciation and thank you for this invitation. And like I have said a couple of times, with this group of amazing women, we have all been colleagues and peers and in the trenches together for so long that our stories are going to sound very resonant with each other because we're, you know, sort of all pulling in the same direction towards the same goal or North Star. So I will try to not completely duplicate what Bobbie and Marie said, because I feel like you could combine them both and end up with me a little bit. So I also think it's important that you get to know me a little bit as a human being and not just as a title. So I identify as Latina. I am an immigrant. I was raised in California from an early age, so a lot of people don't realize that about me. I always get confused whether it's first gen or not first gen or half gen or zero gen. In any case, I'm a proud immigrant with Mexican and Cuban roots, but also spent a lot of time with other groups. And so I just embrace a lot of various Latino cultures. And I'm a California girl. I said that. I'm living in New Hampshire now for 20 years. So a transplant. At this point in my life, I am very much a daughter. I am caretaker to my elderly mother, and that's a primary responsibility for me. It's one I embrace sort of culturally. It's important for us that my mother live with us in the same household, and that my teenage daughter grow up with her as part of the family. Which has repercussions for professional responsibilities as well. But that's part of managing life. And I'm a mother and a wife as well. Like my peers, I have a strong faith component to my passions, to my profession. I grew up very musical. And so I always felt that it was important to be a steward of the gifts I had and use my music in church ministry. And then I'm not exactly sure why, but my mother always modeled community service, despite us being from very humble origins. I just have vivid memories of my mother helping other people. And then I had this, I was very lucky. I was privileged, really privileged to be smart by the sort of classic ways that kids are rewarded for being smart in school, right? We know that there's different kinds of intelligence. I had the kind of academic smarts that assured that I was able to go to good schools and end up a physician like Marie. And so the final thing that was interesting about my upbringing is that I'm an introvert. And I always kind of proudly proclaim that because the world is created by extroverts for extroverts. And as half of the world is introverts, and we maybe take in energy differently and process differently and different speeds. And so what I was maybe quiet, but I noticed stuff that I'm not sure everybody noticed to the same degree. And so I really noticed the isms And I could see that there were huge differences between the experiences of different groups of people in different neighborhoods. And that really bothered me. And so from the age of 5, I did want to be a doctor, and I ended up being a family physician like Marie, where we care for the family in community, right, in the context of this larger whole. And at the same time, I always felt this sort of additional calling that in addition to taking care of people one-on-one, I also wanted to have kind of a larger impact, not in like a grandiose way, but just more in a effective way, right? Like, it's great to take care of people one-on-one, and can't we fix things for everybody? So I eventually learned about public health and ended up, I've been in public health and health policy for a while. And then I was privileged to serve as director of the Office of Health Equity for a little over 10 years. And so in that position, having some privilege and some ability to sometimes have resources to make available, I realized it was important to use my position to create opportunity for others, especially for historically minoritized and marginalized groups and people. And as part of that position, I had the opportunity to lead the team, which includes some of our my esteemed panelists here, for writing of this Governor's COVID Equity Response Team report, which is a strategic roadmap for how to advance equity in the state in light of the COVID, incredible COVID disparities. And I think what people didn't always recognize is maybe they thought it was something we were writing for the governor to do, right? Like a cookbook. And that's not what it was. It was for everybody, from any individual or any organization or any institution, as well as government agencies and people with political positions or officer positions to have information that could be helpful. And we explained a lot about systemic racism, about exactly what our quote tonight is about inequality in healthcare and equity, and how everybody does not have an equal opportunity to thrive at this time. And so, given that this is more the personal introduction phase, I just found that for me, a motto or a sort of a quote that resonated for me from the time I first heard it is from Marian Wright Edelman, which is about service is the rent we pay for being. It is the very purpose of life and not something you do in your spare time. And I think that's true for my friends, these wonderful women who, we could map out for you all the many ways we've overlapped and intersected and worked together and partnered because, equity is not a solo endeavor. It's something that you have to do in partnership with others. It's about co-creating with others in solidarity to advance everyone. Mm-hmm. I did want to mention that, again, we've worked together in many different ways. So Bobbie and I, when I first came here almost 20 years ago, were involved in the New Hampshire Minority Health Coalition, which unfortunately doesn't exist anymore. And then we had something called the New Hampshire Health and Equity Partnership, which is now called the Equity Collective, which is now a little bit more clearly focused on people of color and people in allyship advancing these issues. And then some of us have worked together on the Equity Leaders Fellowship, either as fellows or mentors or champions. And then more recently, it's been kind of fun. Marie and I, thanks to her vision, created something called Lighthouse New Hampshire, which is a Facebook page. So my sort of curmudgeonly old person finally had to get a Facebook account. And we do a word on the street, like once a month, more or less. And we do a topic, and it's about information for people of color by people of color, because we feel like knowledge is power. And when there's all sorts of COVID misinformation and people don't know who to talk to or who to trust, we thought it was really important to have a voice so that people could hopefully have a resource that they could turn to. So I'd urge you to check that out if you can. So I succeeded in my endeavor, which is to make sure that we allowed time for Kirsten to arrive. So yay, perfect timing.
Yay. Thank you so much, Trini, for those riveting comments. And it just, I'm just so struck by, there's so many pearls of wisdom, that have been discussed already. And I just so resonate with your desire, your dedication to make it better for everyone, right? And I think everybody on the panel, this is what you're dedicated to, making it better for everyone through co-creating, and that equity is about that, making it better for everyone. So thank you so much. Beautiful. And Kirsten, thank you so much. You're at perfect timing. We had just started the first round. And so it's perfect. So if you wanted to take it away, that'd be great. And I'm just mindful, Bobbie, what's your schedule? Do we have to say goodbye to you and thank you, or are you going to be here for a bit longer?
No, I do appreciate the opportunity to be here to introduce myself, but I do have to jump off. And so a part of, the work that we all do in this advocacy and pushing out information, I have to run to a Board of Aldermen meeting with the chair of our Board of Health to present on information that will help continue to protect the health and safety of the community of Nashua and the greater Nashua region as we continue through this this COVID pandemic. So I do have to leave you all, but I leave you all with blessings, and you will have a fantastic continuation of discussions with my esteemed colleagues here. So thank you again, Dr. Jennings and Dr. Morris, for inviting me, and you ladies, you rock. So just take it home.
Thank you so much, Bobbie. Good night. And yes, these panelists totally rock. So totally. And so, Kirsten, thank you.
Sure. Thank you so much, Karen. And I thank you for having me. And I do apologize for joining late. I teach a storytelling class on Tuesday nights. And so we were just finishing up, and it's such a intense process that I hate to lose any time with the storytellers. But I am thrilled to be here, and I'm particularly thrilled because I have a college student myself, and so this is a population that I am just in adoration of, and really, really enjoy. And so thank you. So I'm Kirsten Durzy, and who am I? Let's see. Who am I today? So today, I'll start out. I keep thinking about last conversation we had with Bobbie, starting out by introducing herself as a woman and a mom, and I am both, and also a public health and health equity person, and I currently work for the CDC Foundation after 13 years with the Division of Public Health Services here in New Hampshire up until a week before last. So I made a transition, a career transition, and it's nice to remember I can still do that at my age, make new choices and new decisions and new transitions. But I still work with the Division of Public Health Services here in New Hampshire, and I am for the past little over 2 years now, have served as the New Hampshire COVID equity subject matter expert, as well as led the vaccine equity work for our state. So in my new role, I get to do all of that still, and as well as push forward some lingering health equity issues and programs and funding that we've been slowly working on over the past years, in between in moments of calm during the storm of the pandemic. So I was thinking about what I wanted to say tonight, and I was really thinking a lot about coming here from this meeting with this collection of storytellers from around the country who are sort of taking, some of them very comfortable telling their story, and some of them very new at telling a story about themselves. And we're working on telling our stories of the pandemic. And And for me, it always comes back down to this at its core, which is the work that we do in health equity. And I think the work that we do in public health as well. And I know I think we have students studying public health with us tonight. The work that we do is really about understanding that each of us have a story, a unique and authentic and valuable story to tell. And sometimes, we get very caught up in looking at, and I am an epidemiologist, and I get often very caught up in looking at data, in numbers, in tracking trends, and doing all the analysis that we do. And all of that is important. But I try to talk to my team, and if I have the pleasure, and I often do, of working with students, to remind them that every point on that graph, every piece of data is a human being with value, and people who love them and who do love. And so, that is our beloved community. And so it's a pleasure to be here, and I'll hand it back to you, Karen.
Thank you so much. Really, really incredible comments. And the sense that of the inherent value, that I sit amongst you kind of in awe of the panelists because of this incredible humanism that you embody, that everyone has an inherent value, everyone's story, everyone's truth. Truths need to be heard, and that's essential to public health. That's essential to health equity. That's essential to becoming the best self, living our best lives. And so I'm just in awe of the beauty of those sentiments. So let's just pause. Did anyone have any last minute thoughts as we end round one and we transition to round two? Any thoughts or comments or reflections before we go to round two? No, we're okay? Okay, thank you. So Trini, would you mind taking us away on round two? Round two is the panelists' opportunity to really share their prepared statements with us. And so maybe if Trini could start us out with this. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll share some comments. I feel like we covered a lot of it in our extended opening comments about ourselves, because all of us, I think it's true for all of us, is so much of what we do is about ourselves. I've had conversations where people try to say, well, be professional and have your professional life, and that should be separate from your personal life. And lately what I've taken to saying is, I'm brown, not just from 9 to 5, right? Like I am brown 24 hours a day. And so these issues that I deal with, and I often introduce myself that I'm a nerd, in addition to being an introvert. And so like, I read about racism for fun. Like I am all in on learning and hopefully growing and trying to be better at doing this work, which can be difficult. And it's essential, right? Because again, we're called together because of this quote, right? That injustice in health is the most severe and inhumane. Did I get it right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Shocking and inhumane, mm-hmm. Right? And so, so what, when we talk about health, a number of years ago, when I first started in my position at the Office of Health Equity, it was formerly called the Office of Minority Health, because that's what the field was called before that. You would ask people, well, what determines health? And most people would say things like, well, health insurance. And then someone might say, well, a car, you need a car, because if you get sick and you don't have a car, you can't get to the doctor. And someone else might say, well, there need to be interpreters, right? And yet all those things relate to healthcare, like the ability to be seen by a doc. And again, Marie and I are docs, and docs are really important, but healthcare determines at most between 10 and 20% of our well-being and health, how healthy we are, our health as a population. So 10 to 20%, and yet like 98, 99%, 95, I don't know the exact number today, but huge amounts of the money in this country go towards healthcare. And yet what really keeps us healthy as a population are things like, is our, can we walk in our neighborhoods? Is there a grocery store that's accessible with fresh fruits and vegetables? Is my job good quality? Do I have access to benefits? Can I take sick days? Is there transportation? Is the air toxic? Is the water have lead in it? Right? Are my children going to get lead poisoning? So all these things that are in the environments where we live, learn, work, play, and pray, they're called the social determinants of health. And now I find that when I ask this question, what determines health? Most people come up with these answers, right? Education, employment, do you have money to pay the bills? Do you have money to access after school programs? Because like my daughter just went to driver's ed. When I went to school, driver's ed was part of school, it was free, right? And that doesn't seem to be available anymore as part of regular public education that I'm aware, right? And so all these opportunities, all these extracurriculars, all these opportunities to, what are they called? To stimulate our children's growth and development, because all of us want the best for our own children, right? And ideally, we would want the best for all of our community's children, not just our own children, right? Because our children are our future, right? And the economic well-being of our community and our society depends on having healthy workers, whether they're, rich people who can sit in office jobs, what we used to call white collar jobs, or whether they're, driving buses or working in factories, right? And so we are all tied together. We are all invested in each other's well-being. And so, Martin Luther King talked about the beloved community in which everyone is cared for, absent of poverty, hunger, and hate. And it is so important that we realize that health, it's an opportunity for all of us to be as healthy as possible, is completely dependent on, again, being able to address poverty and discrimination and deep power imbalances so that we can have access to good jobs with fair pay and good education and safe housing and healthcare.
Great. Thank you so much, Trini. Eye-opening. The social determinants of health, right, and wellness, our interconnectedness around wellness and health, and how much money though is going to one sliver, right, of healthcare, not the larger picture. Really a breathtaking conversation. Thank you so much. And students in the audience, please feel free to chime in. I'm sure there are all kinds of questions bubbling, so please feel free to chime in with questions on the chat. And so we're pausing. Kirsten, Marie, did you want to add, comment? Yes, you're shaking your heads, yes, with regard to Trini's really riveting comments. Thank you. Marie?
Go ahead, Kirsten. That's fine.
Kirsten?
No, thank you, Trini, and I loved the way you framed that. So I think it's true, and I've noticed that myself, that I think there is an expanded understanding over time, and to be perfectly honest, I think in many ways, if we look, and it's hard to say this because the pandemic has been a pure tragedy from beginning to end, but if there is a silver lining, if there is one, it may be that it has exposed for people in such stark and impossible to ignore ways the realities of the disparities of health in our country, in our states, in our communities. And so I do think in many ways there has been an increase in understanding of the complexities of the human experience and how that interplays with our health and our well-being and our ability to be safe and happy and cared for in our communities. And then I think, I think a lot about, and now, how do we move people even further upstream to really begin to think about what are the systemic issues, 400 years old, at least, in our country that built those disparities in the social determinants of health. You know, how do we talk, and when do we talk, and when does everyone begin to talk openly and continuously about the impact of race and racism, about the impact of wealth distribution and inequities in wealth distribution, and how those systems were built. And I have been so honored over the past years to hear Dr. Dottie Morris talk a lot about how those systems were built, and to learn from her, and to really see that play out. And so I think, you know, there's like this excitement and pride of watching people expand their knowledge, as you talked about, and this like anticipation of when do we even go further and deeper.
Yeah, I love what you said, Kirsten. It so much resonated with what Trini shared. You know, one of the areas that I've been really considering and thinking about in a deeper way is, you know, there's this potential space between acknowledgement and like intellectual understanding and maybe acceptance and action. And that potential space seems to me to have grown murkier. It seems to be less black and white to me. And I think because there is a shift that has to happen mentally and chemically. Dr. Jennings probably can explain it better. There's a shift that has to happen to go from a place of consciousness to a place of habit. And really, that's what we're talking about. You know, when I try to explain this concept of social determinants of health, you know, finally, after almost 2 decades, maybe plus, of the public health community talking about social determinants of health, that where we live, eat, work, and play, and where we worship actually make a difference on our well-being. Finally, the medical community has accepted that. Finally, the medical community has acknowledged racism is a public health crisis. But there still is a dissonance. There's a difference in what we're saying and what we're actually doing. What we're saying is a priority, and how our day-to-day experience of health and wellness as a collective is experienced and lived out. And so, you know, what is that difference in preparedness for change and really transformation? That's what we're talking about, right? Transformation and changing those deep-rooted habits. It is very difficult to stop inertia. You know, how many listeners here today have made New Year's resolutions, and how many New Year's resolutions are maintained at the end of the year, right? And so there's a big jump to have to be made. And so part of that, though, is the continued acknowledgement and accountability process that's required in order to change, because the human mind is powerful. And, you know, we've come to a place where we are in development, partly because our brain is able to create rhythms and habits and routines and structure. And so it's very hard to untrain the brain, even when you acknowledge that the very things that you're working, you're imprinted in, is detrimental to you, plural, or you individual. So that was just so powerful, Trini. And, you know, that bridge, that connection between self and community, again, is just so striking to me.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. You know, and as you were talking, you know, really the three of you, that, you know, that the coming together of the intellectual understanding, accountability, you know, consciousness raising, and then the chasm, Marie, you talked about, between that and action. I wonder, is a linkage affect emotion? Is emotionality, you know, so we need more than acknowledgement. Do we need emotionality about our awarenesses? Is that part of the bridge? I just wonder if that's part of that bridge to to kind of help us cross the chasm. Does that lead us then to motivated behavior? Trini, were you going to comment? I thought you were going to
Yeah.
comment.
Yeah, I mean, I find that, and I also have learned from Dr. Dottie Morris a lot, especially people who are educated, right? Like, it is very easy to stay in your head, right? It is sort of easy to theoretically understand the impacts of racism. It is a lot different to talk to a person across difference, especially if you're not used to being in diverse settings, and hear what they're saying and learn about their experiences. And because when you hear, and that ties all of what we're all saying together, right? The story, right? The individual narrative, right? How can we not be touched in our heart? And I'm always learning from Dr. Dottie Morris, and she reminded me when I was making a different point the other day that we still yet also have to remember empathy and the importance. And it's, as you're saying, Dr. Jennings, it's the emotion. So the transformation, the being able to be anti-racist, move towards equity is not something that we can just do, from reading a book and staying in our head, right? It's about being in community with others. It's about working side by side, out there. And it doesn't matter, like, because everything touches health and everything is determined, everything determines health, and yet health also impacts everything, because you can't hold a job if you're not healthy, right? You can't go to school if you're not healthy. There's so many things that you are limited by if your health is impacted. And so whether it's voting, right? Running for school board, or at least showing up at meetings, so many ways are the environment now. Like I've been saying lately, we're jumping from the COVID frying pan into the climate change fire. There's just so much to be done. And there are equity and justice issues related to every single topic, right? Climate has equity ramifications, the justice system, the incarceration system, right? There's just so many ways in which we can choose to take action. And it's just about, like, we all got to jump in, and we got to lock arms, right? Those of us who identify as people of color in allyship with people who are socialized as white in this country, and may or may not be aware that they probably have had some privileges and very different experiences. And yet, can we all do what Reverend Martin Luther King called us to do, which is to be a beloved community?
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Beautiful. Marie, Kirsten, did you want to comment? Other comments?
Yeah, I think this is really hitting home for me, this discussion too, because I've been thinking recently about how equity is an active verb for me, right? It's not passive. Like, the work can't be passive. It can't just be about understanding or academic understanding of it, and a lot of our work, in certainly, I'll speak for public health, a lot of our work is a lot about academic understanding and sort of passive understanding, but this work has to be active. And so I even think about, we talk about a racism as a public health crisis, but I think we need to talk about racism as a public health emergency, because emergencies are where we put our resources, as a community, right? So this is what drives us to move resources actively, as we have done in this pandemic. And so, to me, like, even the terminology we begin to use begins to make sense. Now, I'm thinking a lot, Dr. Jennings, about the question, like, is it the emotion that's missing? And I do think, like I said, I do a lot of work in storytelling, and we know, I'm sure better than I do, that that neuroscience tells us that there is a connection between telling story, hearing story, and pro-social behavior. So there's a line there, and it's not a dotted line. It's a fairly, solid straight line. And yet, I think, is there any emotion more sort of deeper than grief? And grief, we have all been in collective grief over the last 2 years. And we're not as far as we could be. It's not moving us in ways that it could move us. So I'm not sure. I think it's such an interesting question, and I think one I'm going to be thinking a lot about. I think emotion and empathy, caring does move us somewhere, and yet the most sort of deepest collective emotion we've ever felt, maybe as a country, at least in our lifetimes, has not moved us as far on that needle as we could have. So I'm not, but I appreciate the question. I'm curious to hear what Marie or Trini think.
Yeah. Marie, did you want to jump in? Or?
No, I mean, Kirsten just said it so nicely. I'm just thinking about emotion, and again, the scientist nerd in me too. What's the most motivating emotion from a physical sense, and it's pain, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I wonder if that's the missing link. For me to hear that Black women die at almost 3 to 4 times more rate than those who are identified as white women in the United States, and Black babies die at an alarming higher rate at the hands of white clinicians and teams, that moves me.
Mm-hmm.
That moves me in a visceral way.
Yeah.
How do I translate that to my allies, even those who may not identify as women, right?
Yeah.
So, and that's why it's so important, I think, to, like, there needs to be a translation of equity. There needs to be a reframing of the word to make it resonate, which is why when we're talking about things like racism, that's so easy for people to denounce. Of course, we're too evolved as a society, as a civil society, to partake in racist actions. But inaction and omission can be just as dangerous, or even more dangerous, than actions themselves. And we see that. I see that on a day-to-day. I see that by the care that wasn't given to me and my family because they didn't think we understood them. I could see that by the lack of work or effort in trying to get translating services in an effective way for my patients. I see that for my patients I'm taking care of who suffer from substance use disorder, and the lack of seeing their humanity and looking at them as just their substance use disorder. So there is acts of omission that are deeply painful and traumatic. And those little cuts that happen on a day-to-day basis, even from a societal and secondhand witnessing, it affects people to their core. And so when we talk about the statistics, like Kirsten said, those statistics are human beings. Yes, maybe children who are dying from COVID is not as bad as adults, but those 3,000 kids that have died so far in the United States, that was somebody's child. And that's 3,000 too many. Mm-hmm. So, what moves people to the point of a visceral resignation, mm-hmm. to the point of, I need to do something to make this uncomfortable feeling go away. Now, some people, and when we're talking about Martin Luther King, we often idealize Martin Luther King and what he represented. We also have to recognize that he spoke about issues particularly about disparities and inequalities and inequities that made people uncomfortable, enough so that he was put on a terrorist list. He had an X on him, right? And so we have to remember that. And part of that healing process, I would venture to say, is a deep reckoning with the good, the positive, the advancements that we've made in medicine, but we also have to reckon with the ugly, with the painful, and with the outright, just inequalities.
Yeah, I think, thank you. And, there's so many pearls of wisdom. And one of the uniting themes, and I think, Kirsten, you talked about that, was, empathy and Marie, pain, perhaps as a way to enter empathy. And I think of Trini, what you were saying, that we have to jump in and lock our arms, right? And how do we do that? Empathy. It's that transformational piece, cultivating empathy. I just wonder. I wonder about that, because I think of, my dear sister, Dr. Morris. She talks a lot with me about leaning in. Difficult conversation happens and you lean in. And when Dr. Morris talks about that, you're leaning in with empathy as a way to engage a deeper dialogue. And that, so, I'm hearing that too. It's resonating with me in terms of everyone's comments as well. So thank you so much. Beautiful. And Marie, would you mind talking about your prepared comments, or have you said some of them already? What calls to you?
Oh, what calls to me? I think I'm getting to the point, similarly to both Trini and Kirsten, that I've come to the point that we are the most effective when we walk towards growth and expansion, as opposed to trying to silence certain parts and aspects of ourselves. And that resonates, I think, on how I see the community and how I see equity. And as a family physician, really, to me, I can't have well patients unless equity is at the center of that relationship. And I truly believe that as a foundation, that we can't have well communities, we can't have a well granite state until we are overtly working towards and putting resources towards areas, initiatives that reduce disparities and reduce barriers. And barriers come in multiple flavors. So, as in multiple leadership positions and, talking on a national basis, at the end of the day, it comes down to who's our neighbor. And, last year, I believe it was it 2020 that we had the Citizens Health Report, where, every 5 years, New Hampshire discusses, how is New Hampshire's health as far as its collective activism in the state. And what's really striking to me is that overall, in the state, there are differences on how open and how comfortable we are as Granite Staters to work interdependently with one another. And that varies depending on where we live in the state, the type of communities. So if we have communities that are more densely populated, then there tends to be more bi-directional communication. So, how do we create this environment that can promote people to elevate to their best forms of themselves? So that, to me, it really comes down to empowerment. It comes down to enablement and encouragement. So how can we as individuals empower one another, create that safe space to utilize their voice? And then we have enablement. How can we as leaders and thought leaders future thought leaders here that are participating, how can we enable the people that we touch within our circles of influence to do better, and be the best at getting better for themselves? And lastly, encouragement. From a systems level, we now have acknowledged, these disparities. We are documenting in ways that we've never documented before. We're asking tough questions. How are we going to actually put in resources to create an environment that will naturally want to go in that direction of reducing disparities? So often we stop at the individual, but if we stop at the individual, we forget about the system that allows them the freedom and the bandwidth to make choices that are best for themselves.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. So powerful. Wanted to pause. We have a question in the chat, and I think it's really an important point for us to explore, and I'm curious about what our panelists think. Hello, my name is Gap Bardis. I'm a senior major in nutrition. I have two questions. Eating healthy diet with fruits and vegetables is important for our nation's citizen, but it's less recognition is to help decreased rate of heart disease, that healthy eating is important and decreases the rate of heart disease and obesity among our population. What would you suggest to help making the nutrition profession be more recognized? And how to raise awareness of eating healthily without financial burden for grocery shopping? And it just calls to the resource issues that the three of you have been talking about. Who would like to jump in? What would you suggest to help making the nutrition profession be more recognized, and how to raise awareness of the importance of healthy eating in keeping in mind without increasing that financial burden to families?
I can go if you.
Thank you.
Are you have a burning answer? Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of questions wrapped up in that, so thank you for that. I think encouraging people to go into health occupations is just in and of itself, a whole function of people who both do marketing and other kinds of raising awareness. So I've heard that applications to nursing school are up, to med school are up, because it's a pandemic and people are all of a sudden realizing, oh, there's healthcare people who take care of us. Maybe those are jobs I'd be interested in. There are now so many different ways to work in healthcare, and sometimes people just aren't aware of it. So oftentimes people start college and they think, oh, I want to be a doctor or a nurse because that's really all they've heard of. But the reality is there's I don't know, 150, 200, 250. There's so many different kinds of roles and functions. And then, you can have different options for how, depending on how long you want to stay in school and be, until you get out. And so nutrition, then there's the whole, well, what interests you? Because not everybody wants to spend all their time studying, micronutrients and what goes into a cell and how does it impact us, right? Like there are people who have no interest in that. And so you put all that together, and then you get people who have expertise in raising awareness and marketing, and maybe you can make incentives available, right? So it's like a workforce issue. It's how do you incentivize people, create opportunities. There have to be jobs too. Like we don't want to train a bunch of nutritionists, but there's no jobs for them to go to, right? So all of these things are interrelated. That's the one thing. And then as far as nutrition, I guess what was triggered for me, if I look at the question again, we think about how, for example, EBT, electronic food benefit transfers, started being accepted at farmers markets, and that increased consumption of fresh fruits and vegetables, right? There are ways to incentivize and create opportunities by being creative. The problem is we're always sort of tinkering at the margins or creating workarounds in what are essentially dysfunctional systems, right? And so the real answer is, there's a lot of problems with the way things work, whether we want to say the healthcare system, which is not really a system. It's just like a common, it's an amalgamation of all sorts of different actors. And we could say that also for, government and other sectors that impact our lives. So I maybe it's the end of the day and I'm tired and that wasn't the most coherent response, but that was triggered for me, right? Because it's not a simple question. And so, the food network, the whole universe, the constellation, I'm just beginning to get a better lay of the land of the food access network in New Hampshire. Food insecurity is a huge problem, and COVID really impacted that. So yeah, we could talk about that for sure. So thank you for raising that. And someone else, please add on to what I started.
So I guess I would say, well, first I would say welcome to our world, and we're glad you're going to be in the fight. I think so the concept of sort of food and healthy access to healthy foods is one of the first places where we started talking about this concept of deserts, right, in our country, and we talk about them now in lots of other ways as well. The most recent being this concept of vaccine deserts, but we talk about sort of food deserts and thinking about how do we move access to not just food but healthy food and enough of it to people who want it. And the one thing I think about with nutrition and food a lot is how maybe there is no sort of issue that is more tied to culture than food. And I think about that a lot for my own family and sort of coming here as refugees and and not having access or able to access the foods that were familiar to them and were comforting to them. And so, I think I might be rambling a little bit, but I think where I'm trying to get to is that, often when we talk about these issues in communities, we begin to think about communities as having deficit of some kind, right? A lack of access, a lack of knowledge, a lack of caring even, right? But I would encourage anyone, the questioner or anybody else moving into healthcare or public health or human services to begin to sort of look to explore what is the wealth in community, what is the knowledge and understanding, and once again, point us all to saying the answers are there. People know what they need, and it becomes our jobs to help them get what they want and what they need. And so, not an easy answer, won't be an easy solution, but listening it will be your first step always.
Wow, Kirsten, you really moved that along powerfully. That's wonderful. I did have a follow-up that related to the question. Like I spent 7 years working on diabetes prevention and sort of, prevention of obesity and just healthy eating and trying to move more, like trying to help communities understand that. And I remember that I went to a lot of diabetes conferences, and the complaints from some of the community members that I worked with would be, the nutritionists want us to eat this food and it's not the food that I eat. They give me a plate full of broccoli. And so the program that I worked with was called the REACH initiative, and it was racial and ethnic approaches to community health. And so it's tying into what Kirsten said, right? Like the community has the knowledge and the community cares about their health and well-being. Just sometimes maybe they're working crazy, mad, long hours, or there's no grocery store, right? And no one's going to put a grocery store there, no matter how much they, request it. So there's all these other factors is what I was trying to get into that, have to do with politics and whether it's profitable to put a store, so we have to come up with creative solutions like bodegas that are healthy, right? And other sorts of, what do you call them? The little trucks that drive around with the verduleros, they're called. But so they have the fresh fruits and produce and they drive around, right? Like we're used to those in our countries and in our neighborhoods. It's just not necessarily something that you see downtown. So in the program we worked with, I did not at that point work with the Department of Public Health. This was in Massachusetts. I worked at a community program. And so we helped the state department that worked on diabetes to take pictures for their brochures of culturally appropriate food that would be healthy for diabetes and had pictures of people that look like community members, right? And so these are these like really, what would seem like really fundamental, basic, simple things to be doing. And yet they're big impacts because if you never stop to think, I'm telling you to eat, some potatoes and some broccoli and I don't know what else, right? But that's not what you ever eat. There's a disconnect there, right? And you're never going to be able to help that person if you don't discover that disconnect, right? So communication, in addition to language access, just actually connecting and understanding each other and more are some of the dimensions related to the cultural tailoring and cultural responsiveness of a health provider, right? Whether it doesn't matter what kind of role. It's true for nurses, physicians, the people at the front desk, right? So
I have to just jump in really quickly, and I have to apologize. My 6-year-old was coming in, so I apologize for being a little distracted there. Man, like just such a salient point there. One of the things that when I was growing up and going to school in New Hampshire was I always asked about, well, what was the other side of the story? Me being Haitian from descent, right? We would learn about the Revolutionary War. And I said, well, what about the Haitians that helped with the Revolutionary War? Well, that's not part of the curriculum, right? When we would talk about nutrition in medical school, rice and beans, that's a staple for like 90% of the world, right? But that's deemed to be unhealthy, right? In a nutritional sense. And so, what is the representation of the knowledge that's being provided in your field of expertise? That's one. And what I'm challenging folks here that's listening is that it is very important when you're going through your classes. Yes, you need to pass through the grade or whatever. When you get out though, you have to ask yourself, well, why? Why is it really taught this way? What perspective am I not being taught that may be a different way, an alternative pathway, but it's not the mainstream? What really is mainstream, right? And what I found is that mainstream, traditional, tends to be Eurocentric, right? And so, the question was, how do we promote nutritional equity? We need to promote it from ourselves first. And we need to make sure that the words that we use, the physical expressions that we're providing to promote these, the types of food that we're promoting actually speaks in the language that will be received, both figuratively and literally, to the audience that we're trying to serve and reach. Who are you serving when you're using the type of language and you're using the type of promotion? And so that's a start. And from a systemic level, when you become a leader and when you become an expert in your field, as you are now, in school even, look for legislation that speaks to that. Because I can guarantee you that you, being a senior in nutrition, have umpteenth amounts more knowledge than the average politician that's making the laws that are going to affect the people that you're going to serve. So you make the case. And as a subject matter expert in something that you're passionate about, and that's that jump between knowledge and action. So wonderful question.
Thank you
Yeah, and
so much.
can I just say one last thing, and I know we're pushing up against time, but one last thing related to this that I just want to, I think, leave, new people coming into the field with is whether it's a food desert, a vaccine desert, a care desert, none of this happened accidentally, none of it. And so I think that it's really important we have to remember, do not look to communities to explain why they're living in a food desert. Look to systems to explain why a food desert was created for that community. And so if we start from that perspective, I feel very secure that you're going to work to find a solution.
Great. Thank you so much, for this, powerful conversation. And I really resonate with your applying the discussion about nutritional issues to this larger picture you've been painting. And you've been using the 3 E's. Marie, I call yours the 3 E's, that you've been empowering us, right? To deepen our understanding and deepen our engagement. You've been encouraging us to look at systemic issues and find systemic solutions. And the 3 of you have been really thinking about enabling communities to do the work and express the wisdom that they have, and enabling that wisdom to be promulgated. So beautiful. This has been a fabulous conversation. Thank you so much. It's been such a privilege to kind of witness your relationship with each other and the work you've done over the years and all that you've contributed. It's just, I'm really in awe and speechless in terms of how much I've learned from spending time with you all tonight. So thank you so much. And I know, and thank you so much to that riveting question from the student that really helped pull things together for us. Thank you. And Dr. Morris, did you want to help us close?
Well, I just would like to thank everyone. I have learned so much. I've taken a lot of notes, and I really appreciate the contributions that were made to the conversation from everyone, from the facilitation to the knowledge that was shared to us from our people who are really on the front line and actively doing the work to create the change. And as I said before, I feel so honored to know each one of you. It's been a privilege to be here and to witness this conversation with one another. I wish we could have done it with a cup of tea. That would have been great. And one day we will. And a lot of it because of the work that you are currently involved in finding ways for us to remain healthy until we are able to be together in person again. So thank you very much. Thank you to everyone who were present. This is taped, and it will be. I don't know where Misty will post it, but we could send out an email to let you know where the recording will be posted. But I think it would be really good if we could show it in some classes and to lead into some great conversations. And I'm hoping that each one of you would be willing to come back again and again and again. So that would be, it'd be great if you could keep coming to us because you're part of the family at this time. So what I'd like to do is just leave you with a song that became connected with the movement. And it's a song that will be performed by the Morehouse College Glee Club. And if you know anything about Dr. King was a graduate of Morehouse. So have a good evening. Enjoy the Morehouse College Glee Club singing "We Shall Overcome," a major song with the civil rights movement. Thank you very much, and be healthy, be safe, and do something to make the world a better place. Thank you.
shine.